Hi, I am Sarah Ruffi, the woman warrior lawyer, and today it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce Molly McGrath as my guest. Molly, could you tell us briefly about yourself?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here and so excited for our conversation today and to dive in. So, I am the founder and owner of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. And I started that business. It's amazing when I say this now in 2008. We all remember 2008 and not the best time to start a business. And honestly, I'll say I am never considered myself an entrepreneur. I created that business out of a place of need and passion. So my business, by and large, serves law firms, small solo business law firms, and my niche is estate planning and elder law. Because I just, as you and I were talking about, I'm very, very passionate about working with attorneys that are so heart driven and service driven. And my business really came out. I had an amazing job at a national organization that created software and education and all that for attorneys. And we'd go to conferences all the time, way back when you'd have 2,000, 5,000 people in a convention center. And we would do all these conferences. And then at the cocktail parties, the breakfast, the dinner tables, what have you, I was, quote unquote, the assistant for the coaching program that they had back in the 90s when their coaching was not a street term. And I would just sit and listen. And that is a gift of mine, that I'm a middle stereotypical number 4 and 6 in an Irish Catholic family. I'm the peacekeeper. I'm the listener. I'm the caretaker. That's just who I am. And it's funny, when there's a blow up between my sisters, because all of a sudden, one by one, I start getting a phone call from each one of them individually. I'm like, oh, something happened. So it's just who I am. And I didn't realize that it was a unique ability or something that I could build a career on. But I'd sit at these conferences and just hear people consistently. Their biggest frustration as a business owner were their employees. This constant saying was business would be great, but for the employees, how do I train them? How do I onboard them? How do I empower them? How do I get them to step up and lead? How do I? And my boss at the time had a coaching program for the entrepreneurs, for the small business owners and attorneys. And realized very quickly that the team needed to be in the room next door and have a coaching program to train them on how to step up and lead. So I'd keep going to these conferences, and all the attorneys would say to me, hey, I need you. I need someone like you. How do we clone you? How do we clone you? And it really was by accident that I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's easy. This is what I do, and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't systematized process or anything in that nature. And then I just had a coaching program for employees, and it evolved into a team empowerment academy is what it was called. And through that, everyone would be like, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. I'm like, okay. All right. So back then I had a business partner, and her and I are still dear, 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 dear friends. She got out 3 years ago, and we need to write another book about how to dissolve a partnership with amazing, grace and maturity. But she had another business that she had for trust acting for estate planning attorneys, and it blew up, and she couldn't manage both businesses. So she said to me, give me $1 and I'll give you the business. So I handed her $1 and I got the business. So that was about 3-4 years ago, but we were like, okay, let's write a book. And so we cleared out our little that we had in our savings account. I had just had my son, who's now 19. So he is a baby, and I was married back then, and my husband had a job. So like, okay, I have a little play money that I could play with. And so at night, when my baby was sleeping, she didn't have a baby at that time, we would just get on a phone. There was no Zoom. There was none of that. And we would just puke out the chapters. We just write them and we type them on our computer, and then what have you. And we're like, rearrange it. And I still to this day, people are like, how do you write a book? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm not the, but then we hired an editor, then we hired a graphic designer to do, and you've written a book, you know the process. We've fired more people, more didn't work out than did. And then we published, it was an Amazon #1 bestseller. And to this day, people use it as, we wrote it as truly to be a manual and a blueprint for how, and it's called Don't Be a Yes Chick, how to, oh my gosh, I forget the subtitle of it. I just blanked on it. It's been so long on it, but it basically is a book of how to get your employees to step up and lead. And here it is. Don't be a yes chick. How to stop babysitting your boss, transform your job, and work with the dream team without losing your sanity and spirit in the process. And the reason we called the book that, I'll just say quickly, is because what we realized is so often attorneys would go to these conferences, or business owners would go to these conferences, and they come back, they'd hear about the latest and greatest book. And they come back with these books and give them to their employees. And it landed like, hey, read this because you need to be fixed. And so we came up with a fun, cheeky name of a book, because at one point, my business partner at that time, the whole law firm did a charity drive for a homeless shelter for women. And they all brought stuff that they wanted to donate. And every employee showed up with a box of business books that their attorney gave to them to fix them from all these conferences he went to, or that he heard about on listservs and all this other jazz. And not one of them had been cracked open. I mean, they all had the exact same book. So it wasn't effective. So we wrote this book to get the employee to actually open the thing and read it and start implementing it. And, and then my business just kind of evolved. And now I have a weekly podcast. I drop every Tuesday. And Sarah, I can't wait to have you as my guest. I've written 3 books, and I've been blogging every single week since 2008 and haven't missed a week.
Awesome. You just gave me so many things to different avenues to go down. First question I have though for you is, you said you never considered yourself an entrepreneur. Did it just kind of fall in your lap then, or simply by being at these conferences and having people tell you, how do I clone you, that kind of started to go on that, hey, maybe I can do this? How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. I don't even know if I really had that in my bones, in the confidence to say, hey, I can do this. It started with my caretaking service heart. I'm like, oh, I can figure this out for you. Let me do that. Here, dump all your problems on me and I'll fix it. It started from that place of service and solution and helping people. And that from there, I don't even think I even was like, I can do this. It was just like from a place of a business, but I can figure this out for you. Cause if you tell me what I'm doing is right and resonates with you, then I'll just systematize it. And I didn't even use those words back then. So then I would like, okay, let's create this team empowerment program. And it just flew out of me. It just absolutely flew out of me. And even back then, when I look at what we didn't have the confidence to charge, which, what we are worth, which what entrepreneur doesn't have that problem. And
they still do.
Yeah, they still do. I always tell my attorneys, you're a for-profit business, not a not-for-profit business.
Well, that's when people need someone pushing them, saying, you're not charging enough. I have that in my husband. He's like, Sarah, you keep turning off the spigot because you got too many people calling that they want to get in. Charge what you're worth. And I have fought him every time I have raised my rates. And he's been right every time. Because I don't lose. I'm not all of a sudden having everybody drop off saying, I'm not coming to you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's
amazing how that works. What I'm hearing from you is, and maybe it's even before it was a thing, kind of like coaching wasn't a thing in the 90s. You sound to me like a true servant leader, coming from the position of, using Wayne Dyer's expression
Oh,
of
I love
how
that.
may I serve? That everything he did was how may I serve? That's the feeling and the vibe I'm getting off of you is, well, I can take that problem. I can fix that problem. I can help you. How may I serve?
Yeah,
So
I love that. I do believe that was the starting point for my entrepreneurial journey. And it's evolved, right? So it was same problem that you have. People start coming, and my coach's like, you're not charging enough. So I invest in a tremendous amount of coaching. I have, a life coach. I have a business coach. I have an energy coach. I mean, I'm not a shopper. I don't have closets full of shoes or what have you. All my money goes into coaching and personal and professional development. And so it did start with a servant heart, and I am through and through. I have a servant heart, and let me take that. I can do that. But now, as I've grown and evolved in my journey, I'm really conscious now of, do I want to? Is this the right person for me? Because I've learned the hard way where I said yes to everyone and I took everybody on, and I knew they were going to be an F client. I knew they were going to cost me time, energy, tears, heartache. They were going to blow up my team. I knew it. And so I'm getting wiser. I just turned 50 and I'm realizing that, I'm getting much more conscious through my vetting process of who I want to take on, and really have learned to surround myself with power partners. A lot of people will use the word competition. So there's two sides of my business. One is the coaching and consulting side of things, and another side, which is staffing, which came out of those conferences too, because they're like, can you help me hire? Can I find you? Can you help me hire you? And what have you. So I have that side of the business too. And I just, through that process, I'm getting more and more conscious about who's a good fit for us. Yeah, but there are people that would have hand me a credit card on a phone call. They're like, I don't need a call with you. I know you're good. Here's my credit card. I'm like, whoa. No. Cause I've
I
done
don't
that
know that
before.
you're good for me. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes. And so I've surrounded myself with my competition, if you will, of people that would be seen as my competition, and we all refer back and forth of figuring out who's a good fit for me might not be a good fit for my competition. Or sometimes we're at a point where we have to turn this spigot off, but we don't want to say, no, I'll send it to someone else and then we'll get an affiliate fee for it or what have you. So I've really tried to befriend. And even now where I'm looking to up level and go into some more online training programs so I can make grander impact, I'm not taking on consulting clients. So I'm excited to meet people like you, where it's like, okay, now I have a resource, someone who is an attorney who can speak the language and things of that nature. So I get deeply curious and try to find people that I can lock arms with and we can help each other grow.
I love that. And because I do the same thing. I don't, well, you're so good at throwing all these nuggets out in an answer. It's awesome. Number one is when you filter your clients over the years, and I'm 53, so I'm a little ahead of you, but it's kind of interesting as each decade goes by, there are bits of gold and silver that you pick up along the way. And what I'm discovering in my 50s is that little voice inside of me, or that little person sitting on my shoulder, like, hey, Sarah, do this or don't do that. I've really come to trust and admire that part of me and listening to it and honoring it, because anytime I don't, I end up in trouble. And that is when I get C, D, and F clients that simply need to go. And when you can spot them and weed them out on the front end, it just makes everything so much better. So
Yes.
it's awesome honoring that. I like how you work with all these different coaches. And I'm a firm believer that at some point I've worked with a number of coaches in my business over the years. And you find that at some point you meet the coach at their level, and then it's time to move on to another one, unless your coach is working with their own coaches to continue up leveling themselves. Which leads me to my question: when you're working with all of these coaches and you have all of these competing interests in your daily life, do you find that it's almost like ebbing and flowing, that you need one of those coaches more at a particular time than the others, and they all seem to fit and come to the forefront when they're needed?
Yes. Yeah. For quite some time, I worked, I would say probably for a good 3 years solid. I worked with my energy coach, which you just explained, the little guy on the shoulder, that, rumble in your belly, that you're like, something's not right here. Cause I negated my intuition. I live my life by committee. So I would ask everybody else if this was a good decision. I'd go to the business coach and where you get strategy and you get proof of concept and you get data and you get, everything's about KPIs and ROIs and a plan and all that. And for a long time, I knew what the word intuition meant. I admired the concept. I would tell other people that, the good old mighty gut check, but I really couldn't find mine in my sales process, in my onboarding process, in my what have you, because I was coming from a place of the caretaker. I was coming from the place of servant, service. So I'm like, oh my God, I see how much pain this person is in, never ever being like, well, it's self-created. And never asking the powerful questions of what they've done before, and then really being quiet and listening to them tell me everybody else in the world who has totally destroyed them and how they're a victim, and missing out on those things. And so yes, I worked for a long time. The only one I worked with was my energy coach, and really working, which is the same as my life coach, which really working. And I spent a tremendous amount of money, to the point where I went and became a master Reiki master, because I just had so much head trash. I just was living in my intellect of, business decision. Don't say no to a client. I need the money. I need whatever. And it always turned out to costing me money and becoming, and it really took, I got out of a really bad partnership, not the one I just spoke of. I also owned another legal organization, and I was fully unaware that for 16 years that my business partner was a master narcissist.
Oh,
And it wasn't until I got shingles terribly that I finally was like, you can appreciate this. I was exhausted, and I was living on fumes. And, there's one of my favorite books is Body Keeps Score. So if you're not going to listen to the thump on the head, I'll just completely, I'll go give you shingles. And if you don't like shingles, what do you think's going to be next after
I'll
that?
give you something else.
I'll give you something else. You're not listening. You're asking for these signs. I am handing them to you and you're ignoring them.
Funny how often we do that. You commented that you're number 4 out of a lineup of 6 in an Irish family. How many boys and girls in the lineup?
5 girls, 1 boy.
And where does he fall in the lineup?
He's right after me. He's number 5.
Number 5.
So number 6 was an oops. Like the 4 girls were trying for the boy, and then the boy came, and then my sister Meg were like, oh, you're the oops.
Okay, I think every family, they joke about having one of those when you got multiples. Our oops was number 3, and at least he came 18 months after number 2, so we didn't have a big gap.
Irish
but when
twins.
we had number 3, we had to have number 4. So I get it. Just out of curiosity though, when you're in that lineup and you're number 4, it sounds like you're the one that the other sisters come to complain that you can tell when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always more the observant kind of peacekeeper in the tribe?
From day one,
You came home that way.
I came home that way.
And have you found that you were able to channel that as you got older and really use that? It sounds like that's really where you got your start, is just by being that observant listener, peacekeeper, problem-solving person.
Yeah, this is a great question. Now that you're asking it, I'm sitting here kind of backpedaling on my journey. And I think it's my greatest, but it was my greatest blessing and my greatest curse. So that's what got me into the business that I am in right now. And that was 100% being observant, being the listener, being the place that people would come to. But the way I interacted with it before was that give me all your problems. And because I can't handle the chaos and conflict. And I see a lot of my attorneys do that as well with their clients, with their employees, and a lot of CEOs and C-suite people do that as well. And it wasn't until honestly, until I had that massive breakdown with that partnership I was in, and I started working on my energy, and not only my energy, but other people's energy being stuck on me, and spent a tremendous amount of time and money and energy. I'm working on that the way that I handle it now is very, very different. I do it from a place of leadership and from a place of facilitation and from a place of mediation, so to speak. I also went and got certified as a mediator, because in the coaching industry, there's a very fine line between coaching, consulting, and mediation. And I was always in coaching mode, and really understanding when the time and place for those different hats. So I would say in the beginning, I very much was doing it from a place of I can't handle the chaos and the conflict. So give it to me, because I can handle it all and I can fix it. Now, like all of us, as you evolve, as you get older, as you get wiser, as you have more horror stories under your belt, from now, I am very, very, very conscious that I'm not carrying around people's backpacks of problems anymore. It's not my job to be Mary Poppins. And so I'm really, really conscious of holding space for people to get clarity, but handing back their problems to them.
So what have you learned, or what's one piece of advice that you could give people who are living in the chaos of collecting everybody's problems and putting all of those rocks in their own backpacks rather than helping the people that are giving you the rocks to tackle their own?
I love that question. I would say the biggest thing that my coach has given me that has helped is that really holding space for people to communicate that to them, to whatever it is, or having a problem with an employee or life problem or what have you, being very, very present and active, listening to that. And then when they're done, reflect it back to them and clarify and verify. So you're telling them what you heard. And right when you do that, it de-energizes everything, because then it helps them to sit and process. It calls for them to be present versus I just want to complain for the sake of complaining. And if you let me complain, we got an hour call and you let me complain for an hour, and I'm not in facilitation mode and I'm not driving this conversation, and understanding your goal is for them to get clarity on what their next step is, not for you to take all their problems and to fix it for them, but then give it back to them by clarifying and verifying, and then having them come up with a solution and really having those powerful questions. I've written blogs and done podcasts and what have you on the power of the pause. Like your job's not to have a solution and answer. A lot of times people know what to do. And a lot of times people have a habit of saying, I don't know. And the greatest hack that my coach gave me, well, if you did know, what would it be?
Exactly. And the kicker is when you say, I don't know, it's usually comes after that little voice inside of you giving the answer.
Yes.
And then you start to question it or double guess and spit out the lame, I don't know, because it's easier and somebody else can give me the answer.
Yeah. Or it's, I don't want to know, or I do know, but I don't really want to do the work or have the hard conversation or leave the job or whatever it is.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And I know that we have a hard stop, so I want to be conscientious of our time. I think we might have to do a part 2 because this is awesome. If you could change one thing in today's world without any effort on your part other than snapping your fingers and it's done, what would you change?
Great question. I would say the number one thing that I would change is people having the courage to have courageous conversations and people to have real-time conversations. I think communication and upfront, honest, well, respectful conversations would change everything. Everything in the workplace, in the family dynamic, within relationships, call it spouses, friends, kids, what have you. I can't tell you how many people that I've interacted with, even just in my 28 years within my business, and of how often people will be in a conversation and shut down and not say anything and then carry that load for so long. One of my favorite sayings that I heard that stopped me in my track from the movie We Bought a Zoo is when Matt Damon said, all it takes is 20 seconds of insane courage. And I love that saying because it's the emotionality that we carry around the conversation that we have to have, whether I want to raise, I need to quit, I want a divorce, this isn't working for me, what you said really triggered me and harmed me or hurt me or wasn't accurate or whatever it is. And the ability to do the old referee, like timeout, and have an adult and it might be emotionally charged, and it's okay. So often in my book, I write about this. The reason that employees won't have a conversation with their bosses, you know what the number one reason is? They're afraid they're going to break down in tears. They're afraid. They've been taught and conditioned that is sign of weakness to get emotional, that if you show up in your boss's office, and the reason the boss won't have a conversation with the employee is they're afraid they're going to start to cry and they're not going to know how to hold space for all those emotions. And so if people can have real-time, upfront adult conversations, even when you're shaking in your boot, and have those courageous conversations, there would not be all of that would be my greatest piece of advice in business and life.
That's awesome. And it's something that everybody can start a little bit, because you do a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. Great advice.
Yeah.
So now if somebody wants to check out your podcast or your books or your blog, where would they go to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to hiringandempowering.com, and is spelled out. And you can just subscribe to our feed and we drop a podcast every Tuesday and a blog every Thursday. And you can go into the archives and see everything that we have posted, everything around communication, leadership. I really try to consistently speak into the voice of both the entrepreneur and the employee, because I'm really, really passionate about having empowered employees who know what it means to have your entrepreneurs back and for them to find their voice. I've also written books about speaking your truth, and I'm really passionate about that. If people can really own that, we can go into all the science around people holding all that emotions and all that in their body and what occurs. I'm just really passionate about people finding their voice and using their voice in an honest, well, respectful manner in a way that, creates impact.
Love it. Thank you so much, Molly. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. And if you liked what you heard, click the subscribe button, check out our other podcasts, and go live life on your terms and have some of those challenging, upfront, honest conversations. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.